Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. Today we are talking about Secure Rural School Funding. What is it? Well, it's a federal program that is designed to compensate counties and school districts for taxes they don't receive off of federal lands. See, in most counties that have mostly private land, property tax fuels most school district operations. And it also fuels a lot of county operations. But when you're in a county that has 80, 90, 95% federal lands, they need to receive funding from the federal government because they're not going to get it in property tax. And that's where this comes from. PILT, Public in lieu of taxes for the BLM, SRS, Secure Rural School Funding for the Forest Service. So to give you a little bit of background on how SRS got started, what the concept is, we go to Cameron Porter.
Summer break starting across the state, students are moving on to higher grades and leaving their old schools behind. But the school stays where it's at. There's a sense of permanence associated with a school. The idea that this school may be closed due to a lack of funding is hard to fathom. But in some of Utah's rural counties, school districts are faced every couple of years with the possibility of losing some of the funding they rely on to keep class in session. This funding comes from the Secure Rural Schools program. So what is this program? Well, let's take a history class and go back to the year 2000.
At that point in time, there was a fund that was called the 25% fund. So those receipts that were collected from those purchasers of national forest timber, 25% of it went to local governments to support schools and roads. And over time, as the competition increased, the 10, 12 billion board feet of timber a year that was sold generated large amounts of money that benefited local governments, and particularly in the Northwest and also here in Utah. So as a result of that, when the spotted owl issues heated up and the Northwest forest issues heated up, then that went away, and the Secure Rural Schools was offered as a means by which to help local governments support roads and schools. And it was nowhere near the amount of money that was available prior to that.
So after logging and forest management was prohibited in these areas, the Secure Rural School Fund was set up to give school districts that relied on the 25% fund a replacement. Unfortunately, this then left the fund vulnerable to the discretion of legislators.
Now today, Secure Rural Schools is more or less hamstrung by the processes that were in place, that when you dedicate something or delegate it to appropriations and the funding cycle and the Tea Party issues and the rest, it starts to shrink up. Next thing you know, you haven't got local monies for local governments, schools, that sort of thing.
Many on both sides of the aisle belittle the Secure Rural Schools Fund as nothing more than a form of Western welfare. But the truth is, the counties that receive these funds would rather not need them at all. They see the Secure Rural Schools Fund as a less worthy replacement of the money they were getting from the Timber and Forest Management Fund.
In the meantime, the Forest Service's budget is about 70% of its budget is used in firefighting. If you went back to the time that when Clinton and Gore put that all into place, you'd see it was less than 12%. And those budgets go up when you have DC-10s dropping slurry on your fires, whereas before, if you removed the vegetation, created a product and sold it into the marketplace, we're that much better off.
Hopefully this has been educational for you. For the County Seat, I'm Cameron Porter.
Thanks, Cameron, for that report on how we got Secure Rural School Funding. Now we're going to look at the impacts it has in its current form on school districts here in the state. We'll be right back with the County Seat.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
I'm a Utah's own dairy producer. I care about the health of my animals, and I care about the quality of food we produce.
Because when it comes to providing quality dairy products, I understand the importance of Utah grown and raised.
And the jobs we enjoy are vital, because Utah's Own supports our communities.
As a consumer, I look for Utah's Own products, because Utah's Own is good for me, and it's good for Utah.
Keeping it here at home, Utah's Own.
The Utah Farm Bureau has always been there to fight for the needs of its members, with discount programs on items ranging from vehicles and ATVs to health and wellness. The membership fees aren't big, but the results are. We've been around since 1916, and we're not leaving anytime soon. Utah Farm Bureau. We work for those who work to feed the world.
Welcome back to the County Seat. We are continuing our conversation about the Secure Rural School Fund, SRS. Joining us for the conversation from the Paiute County School District is Kobe Willis, who's the business administrator, Superintendent Shane Erickson, Commissioner Leland Pollock, who's been a champion of this effort to keep it funded as the commissioner here in Garfield County. The show is originating from the Garfield County Courthouse. So we've kind of now got a history that the Secure Rural School Fund was set up to compensate counties and was running off of royalties from timber harvests, and that it operated that way for some time. When timbering started to be pulled from the Forest Service as a major activity, then it started to be subsidized, and you guys have been fighting for it ever since. I guess I want to start the conversation is explain to me how much of a difference that makes to a school district like Paiute County.
It's paramount, it's significant. We rely on that funding as bread and butter. We acquire somewhere between $120,000 and $150,000 annually. And so you take a small district like Paiute, that would be equivalent. If we lost that funding, for example, that would be equivalent to losing 2.5 teachers. And so our daily operation costs, our annual operation costs are right around $4.5 million, and we start looking at that. Secure Rural Schools is about 3.3% of our budget. And right now we appreciate what the legislators do to help us retain that funding, but from year to year recently we've had to assess if we're going to actually acquire that funding, and so we have to start looking at, do we RIF, reduction in force, where do we find ways to actually compensate for the loss of that funding. And so from year to year, as we start looking at our annual budgets, that is a significant fund that we rely on and hold dear.
As a numbers guy, Kobe, how much of an impact would that, I mean, how hard would that be for you to juggle?
Well, as the superintendent said, the $150,000 is equivalent of about 2.5 teachers in a school district that only has 27 teachers, a couple of those being part-time. 2.5 is a pretty significant cut. Last year the State Office of Education had to do an exercise where they tried to cut 2% from their budget, and it was extremely difficult for them. So for us to lose over 3% would definitely make a big difference on, and it's different for every school district and how they allocate that Secure Rural Schools money. Paiute School District has elected to use it for salaries and benefits, which means we're committed to using that funds to staff our schools, and so losing it is a big difference.
This is even a bigger impact for Garfield County. We've addressed that on the show before.
Well, it is. You got a school in Escalante. In 1996, they had 150 children, 7th through 12th grade. They've got 51 children now. So they're, you get per pupil funding. That's how they receive revenue. So if you take this money away, which we are the largest forest county in the state, so we're one of the highest recipients, it puts that entire school at jeopardy in Escalante, Utah.
So a critic, Leland, would look at it and say, well, they don't deserve as much money, they don't have as many students. What happened to the students?
Well, that's easy. They created the Grand Staircase National Monument, for one, and that reduced the numbers. They shut down all sawmills in the county, all those jobs. If you move to Escalante and try to make a living, it's very difficult to try to raise a family right now. But here's the thing, you know, and back to the critics, I appreciate that question. But one thing you can't criticize is the fact that Garfield County is 93% federal owned, largest forest county in the state. Okay, this county is the size of Connecticut, and it has all of that land, so we've got to have help in one way or another. We can tax 3.5% of this land, but we have to have them honor that original congressional agreement, which goes back to 1908.
So SRS is kind of like the BLM version of PILT then? Well,
it is, but it's much different because Theodore Roosevelt reserved the forest in 1905, which was great. It was a great thing. And it received, as you say in your opening segment, a revenue for many years through logging and a little bit grazing and whatnot. But, you know, around 2000, the year 2000, all that went away because they shut down all the sawmills. That's when they created SRS.
Okay, very good. We're going to take a quick break from the county seat. We'll continue our conversation and delve into possible solutions to the problems. When we come back, we'll be right back in a minute.
149 million years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
Let's be honest, you don't know much about Beaver County. Well, let me tell you about it. It's the birthplace of outlaw Butch Cassidy and inventor Philo T. Farnsworth. Some of the best skiing in Utah is at Eagle Point. You've got camping, Canyon Breeze Golf Course, Crusher and the Tushers Beaver Territorial Courthouse, snowmobiling, renewable energy, Pioneer Car Show, Squeaky Cheese, ghost towns to explore, best water in the country, Paiute ATV trails, Old Frisco Kilns, horse races, hunting, fishing, and it's a good place to live. Beaver County, mountains of fun. I could tell you more, but why don't you come and see it for yourself?
Color. It's something that can be seen. But have you ever wanted to reach out and touch it? Experience it. In San Juan County, Utah, color comes to life like nowhere else on earth. Color can be more than an abstract. Color can be your gateway to a new world. Visit San Juan County and explore the past, present, and future in a way that you've only dreamed of. San Juan County. Color your experience.
Welcome back to the county seat. We're talking about secure rural school funding today on our program. I guess I want to kind of address the situation. You know, let's take Paiute and let's talk about impacts going forward and what you guys have to keep your eyeball on in the future, because this is a thing that has a slight reprieve right now, but it's still a problem that is in front of us all the time. So, you know, what is your decision-making process?
Well, initially I'd say as we assess, the business administrator and I assess with our school board, and we talk about our funding from year to year, we're always concerned about the WPU of students. In Paiute we have, a little bit of progress at times with student increase, not so much at other times, but for the most part it's stagnant. So we have to look at other funding sources. That being said, when we have a potential of lost funding, we have to really take a step back and say, first of all, we put kids first and say, how do we keep kids first? But in a small district like us, and like we are, we have to then step back and say, we potentially have to look at a RIF, reduction in force, consolidation of programs, loss of programs. In a RIF situation, it gets a little more personal in Paiute, because if we have to say we're going to reduce teachers because they may make X amount of dollars a year, and if we have a loss of secure rural schools funding, which is $150,000, again equivalent to 2.5 teachers, that affects families. You know, you talk about small districts and people working together and collaborating and knowing each other, that brings wedges, it brings feelings and so on when you start to cut teachers, when it's their lifestyle, and that's what they have in a small district. That's a system we have to help keep families where they are. Huge, huge impact.
How do we repair this?
Well, Rob Bishop has a bill. It's called the Active Forest Management Plan. It brings back active forest management. It brings back revenue. It brings back sawmills. It brings back grazing, multiple use. Remember, this land was reserved for the multiple use and enjoyment of the public. The Forest Reserve was a great thing. It really was for many years. And let's get back to the original intent of the presidential proclamation and action. So that's multiple use. So Rob Bishop, absolutely, we support him and we appreciate him with his active forest management bill. And he's been working hard on that diligently.
So would that start to replace the handout status of, because SRS right now, basically there's no revenue to offset it, so they have to go out and look as a handout like every other social welfare and entitlement program. Would this turn it back into income off of revenue? Is that the idea?
It absolutely would. We were back in D.C., myself, Commissioner Whitney, Commissioner Lefevre, and Pearson a couple of weeks ago. We spoke to all of our delegation. This would fix that, absolutely. The one thing that we all need to be aware of, and we appreciate our delegation, they're going to stick by us and support this, we need bridge funding like SRS. Until you get the sawmills back up and running, which is in this bill, and the people back out on the land and mining and all those multiple use things, we need bridge funding like SRS.
Is most of that revenue sustainable? Because that will be a question. People will ask, you know, what, I mean, if there was a return of a multiple use scenario in Piute County, what kind of things would start happening on the land that would help generate those funds?
What do you see there, Kobe, as the BA?
Well, historically, Piute's had a history of having mines in Marysville. They have had some lumber mills, but I'm not entirely confident on the complete agricultural picture on the county. As far as the school district is concerned, most of our employees also have agricultural side businesses, and the county's primary industry is agriculture.
Well, would this change grazing and grazing allotments and fees paid for grazing allotments at all with this new bill?
You mean the bill?
Uh-huh.
I think it would address many things. You know, the people have to realize, and I don't say this enough, our delegation is working hard for us in D.C. to do some good things. And that's Chaffetz, Hatch, Lee, Bishop, R. Chris Stewart, which has been a champion for us and helped us again with SRS, working very hard. They want to put us back to where we were, and that's what everybody wants. And they're going to help us, I believe, and support us with bridge funding.
So in the meantime, what's the timeline on this bill? How soon might that possibly happen?
Well, it could get vetoed now, obviously, because of the administration, but he's going to stay with it. They're like I am. We get paid to try, and that's what we do, and that's what I do for Garfield County. I try. I'm not a silver bullet, but I get paid to try to help with problems. Now, on the ground, the impacts to grazing and the people by not having multiple use are extreme. I mean, 93% is controlled by the federal government in this huge county. So it's heavily impacted on, it has a heavy impact on what we do, the stiff regulations. So yes, we absolutely need to get back to the multiple use concept.
Can that be done in your mind and not have an impact on the land? Because the first flag that's going to go up is that we're going to return to a rape and pillage mentality, and that's what people are going to argue against it.
Well, let me tell you, 10 million acres burned in the West last year. 10 million acres was incinerated. That's insane to do that. And what this bill does is it addresses active forest management, correct forest management. The correct way to thin timber and manage the forest. make it healthy again so you don't have bark beetle and the risk of catastrophic fire, and you're not damaging your watershed. If you put that many straws down into the water table, you're going to use all your water and suck it out of the ground. So this bill, I applaud his efforts. And I think it would be the best thing we have. We have to look at it this way. It's not a perfect world. We have to do the best we can with what we're given, and I think this bill does that.
Well, and from a standpoint of budget, again, in a small district, $4.5 million. As we look at the preliminary budgets with our school board in May, and we look at our funding and finalizing our budgets in June, you know, that's really something that we hope to be proactive with too, trying to be a help and a resource to facilitate this process moving forward. But again, as we look at the budget, the SRS funding is something we would like to rely on from year to year and know that we can earmark it for salaries and benefits rather than wondering from year to year if it's going to be a question. Although we know that legislators are doing great things there, we hope that trend continues. But you know, in a small district like ours, that SRS funding, again, you can see really how it can make a significant difference.
So certainty is a big issue to you guys.
Well said.
I do want to pose one question for a quick answer. If you were to bring some of this diverse use back and bring more people into your community, it's not going to change the ratio of public land versus private land. Does it affect your tax base as a school?
It does.
I would say so.
Having more families in the community makes a significant difference on our tax base. When we start talking about reductions in force, for a county like PILT School District, it's a downward spiral to start on that because so many of our students are the children of people that work in the school system. So if you start cutting people from the school system, you lose community members, you lose property, property tax base, and so it makes a significant difference on kind of starting a downward spiral.
So vacant houses.
Part of that downward spiral would be if you lose the SRS funding, then of course if you go to a RIF, have to cut teachers, they take kids out of our system, we lose WPUs as they go.
Okay, so
and we may not be able to replace those teachers.
So it has multiple impacts all the way around.
Absolutely.
All right, very good. We're going to take a break. We'll be back for our wrap-up on our SRS program in just a minute.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
Shopping in Davis County has never been better. Experience Station Park, Northern Utah's premier gathering place for shopping, dining, and entertainment. With over 100 shops, Station Park is something for the whole family. Or explore the shopping possibilities this season under one roof at the Layton Hills Mall. Both are conveniently located north of downtown Salt Lake, just off I-15. Come take advantage of special discounts and a wide selection of stores. Visit playindavis.com for more info.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about secure rural school funding and the challenges that it's been through, where it is, and looked a little bit at where the future might lie with some new legislation. But as always, I may have missed some final thoughts. So, Have at it. What points do we need to get out about this?
One thing I would mention with our Secure Rural Schools funding and the potential loss of that, we just recently met with our board and negotiate. We're in process of negotiation with our teachers, and we look every year at a possibility of $115,000 to increase cost of living, what we call COLA. We also have to look at steps and lanes, insurance rates, and so on. And you know, that's this year right around 100 grand. And again, you know, when we talk about the loss of that SRS funding, we would have to step back next year or the following years and say, you know, do we now have the ability to provide a cost of living at the same increases we have for teachers? Are we able to still provide steps and lanes? Can we still retain an insurance at the level we do to help augment some of the funding cost in insurances? So again, with the WPUs, the COLA, all those different things are impacted by potential loss of funding.
Well, this is an interesting thing that in the break became clear to me, because I was focused just on property tax and saying that there'd be a better property tax rate with a house there, but it's the number of kids also has a big impact. So you got a family that moves in, you've got an earning wage, and they've got a growing family. What kind of impact does that have on a school?
Well, the WPU sits around $3,000 per student. So again, if you have to go to a RIF because, again, a loss of SRS funding, you have to cut teachers. They take a family of 3 or 4 children with them. Significant loss to our district, not only from the funding loss, but WPUs and students walking away because mom has to find a job in another area.
And so if somebody moved in to set up a logging mill and they brought 4 children with them, that would have a positive impact.
Significant.
Absolutely. You look at Escalante. I mean, Escalante needs help. And the problem is 51 children, 7th through 12th grade, you need jobs there. You need multiple use of that land so you can have sustainable jobs so they can raise a family and put children in that school, as well as funding to keep the school system whole. So it's, you know, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we've got to get back to multiple use of the land. That is the only way that it's going to work. You can't just lock up huge tracts of land for one little special interest or special interest group, like some of these things have happened on the Boulder Mountain, you know, closing roads and trying to shut down access. So multiple use is the answer to this.
Okay. Well, we do appreciate your taking the time to join us here on the county seat, and we invite you to look at this in detail. You can find out more information about Secure Rural Schools. Go to our website, look for some links, and get engaged in the conversation and the process. And it sounds like, Leland, that our legislative coalition could maybe use a little cheer of endorsement on this.
Absolutely, and the governor. The governor is working hard, our delegation is working hard, their staff is working hard. So they need the support, and all commissioners in the state need to support them right now because they're doing a good job.
Okay. Thank you for inviting us into your home every week. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Be involved, be part of the process, and we'll look for you next week on the county seat. If you'd like to share this video with your friends, well, you do that right here. If you would like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you do that over here. If you'd like to interact with us on the county seat, that happens over here. If you want to watch the next episode of the county seat, you can catch it Saturday night at 11 or Sunday morning at 8:30 on ABC4 Good for Utah.